And welcome to Recovery Report Live. I'm Dan Odess, president of GlobalPro, where we manage risk to recovery, and we have managed more than $1 billion in recovery for thousands of policyholders. Whether you're a business owner or a community association, we want to help you navigate the complex claims process, help you place insurance, and evaluate your risks. There's so many things going on in the marketplaces throughout the country and abroad that are impacting your rating. Whether there are things that are being disclosed, there's things that are happening as it relates to outside of the insurance industry, in the real estate market, and various other parts of in different industries that take a toll on the insurance industry and dramatically impact the type of insurance that you can buy, whether it's the type of products that we're buying, the price that we're paying for it, or what they're actually willing to insure. These things are constantly changing. We want to make sure that you have the information you can use as policyholders. That's what the Recovery Report Live is all about. Today, we are hoping to have on our very own Matt Sengsourinh, Senior Vice President of GlobalPro, but he is working very hard on the front lines on the West Coast, representing a number of policyholders that are in dire need of assistance. We continue to field calls and inquiries regarding claims that are either recently reported or had been reported, and with lots of promises from adjusters or examiners. We have a number of clients already experiencing a shift in management where they're transferring their claims from one person to the next. Meanwhile, the CFO of the state of Florida continues to berate the people that are actually boots on the ground doing what they can to help, whether you're a mitigation contractor or a public adjuster, an attorney, whatever you may be, trying to advise policyholders as to what to do. Your industries are being attacked by the very person that is in charge of regulating our industries. And interestingly enough, public adjusting and mitigation contractors alike are heavily regulated. There is a tremendous amount of focus during the legislation sessions over the past number of years, almost 10 years now, where they have dramatically shifted and changed the obligations, the licensing requirements, the bonding, the background checks. Everything that you might imagine has been clamped down on, whether it's fees, how contractors get paid, how they advertise, how they market themselves, everything that you could think of, every facet of the business, collecting our files, disclosing information to the Department of Insurance when they make requests of us. All of these things are required of a heavily regulated industry, whether you're public adjusting, you're being an insurance advocate, or you're a mitigation contractor. There's an extraordinary amount of legislation around these industries requiring compliance. And we still are taking the brunt of a lot of unnecessary aggravation, I assume, or frustration in the insurance market, and allegedly we're the cause. Public adjusters or contractors, insurance advocates are the cause. People working on behalf of policyholders are somehow the cause of the difficulties in the insurance market, despite the fact that the requirements with regards to the disclosures of financials and information that was supposed to be available for this last session, or as most of us policyholder advocates believed would be produced, was not. And yet more legislation, more restrictions were passed on the various different industries that are trying to help policyholders keep the insurance companies honest, which, quite frankly, given what we have already seen in the fallout of Hurricane Ian, has nothing to do with insurance advocacy. It has more to do with the fact that insurance companies are far too understaffed and lack the resources, which I believe is intentional, to actually properly administer claims. And here we have the CFO in the news berating the industries, calling them, predators, literally, quote unquote. Meanwhile, if you actually look at the fraud that's committed in the state of Florida, and you can go on the CFO's own website and look at it, and you'll notice one thing. Most of the trends regarding insurance fraud has nothing to do with advocacy, has to do with insurance brokers, and most often nothing to do with property insurance. It just begs the question, why? What have we done wrong in advocating for policyholders? Now, there's always some bad apples. I'm not saying that everyone is out there to do good, but the reality, though, is in a heavily regulated industry with so many laws and restrictions on everything from marketing and advertising to contracts to fees to quite frankly, how you get licensed, how you become a licensed, you have to go through an apprentice program, none of which is required to be an independent adjuster or a company adjuster working for an insurance company. None of it. Even though it's those individuals that are going out that you're hearing the most complaints about, and there's less of them working on behalf of insurance companies. But somehow, it's just simply, I think it's just a byproduct of making claims. Insurance companies just don't want to pay money to policyholders. Yet they're making billions of dollars individually, trillions as an industry year over year. Look at what they made during the pandemic. While businesses were suffering, rates were going up, we were allegedly in a hard market and probably one of the best free-flowing economic free markets we have seen in decades, and insurance rates were still going up, policies were restrictive coverages, yet it's the public adjusters, it's the attorneys, it's the insurance advocates like GlobalPro and others that are causing the rates to go up and do these things. It just does not add up and does not make sense. And if you look at fundamentals, that's the issue. If you look at the fundamental issue and how claims are handled and administered, they're actually lobbying for extension of time to adjust claims. They're lobbying for less coverage and also further restrictions on policyholder advocates' abilities to advocate, to represent you, to make it even economically feasible or possible for those that want to protect the interests of policyholders to do their jobs through restrictions on contracts and marketing and fees and all these other things. So being so heavily regulated by the CFO and all of his cabinet members and other legislators, and being so regulated by all of this and what you may have out there, and be so heavily regulated, how is it possible that we are still, as insurance advocates, billed as predatory industries when, again, we're leveling the balance of the scales, right? We're working to try to make sure that the product that you bought is working for you and paying. And let's not forget that the state of Florida did an investigation into the impacts of public adjusters shortly after a major hurricane and found that with the representation of a hurricane, you receive between 500 and 700% more than if you did it on your own. It didn't prove that there was fraud in it, no. It just said that if you have an advocate who actually knows what they're doing, working on your behalf, you're going to receive hundreds of percentages more than if you do it on your own. Those are facts. That's the state of Florida. It's not the industry didn't go out to prove a value. The insurance industry lobbied for these types of reports, and they produced these reports. Obviously, it took quite a long time, just like the financials that they're supposed to disclose in support of the legislation action they took. You know, it begs the question, like one of the things I'm hearing, all this litigation. They give this crazy statistic about like 70% of the first-party litigation in the countries of Florida, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what about the dollars and cents behind it, right? Because I'm paying for insurance using money. I'm getting paid back. I'm getting paid back money. Why don't you tell us how much value or dollars are in those claims? Because if I had to guess at it, I'm assuming that litigation that they're so frustrated over accounts for fractions of a percentage of the total value of the premiums being collected by insurance companies on a year-over-year basis. I would guess that that's what it is, but I'm guessing because, quite frankly, they're just not disclosing that information, right? They're not producing that information to support this insinuation that it's the litigation, it's the public adjusters, it's the mitigation companies, it's any sort of insurance policyholder advocate working on a policy is the reason why our rates are what they are. It just doesn't fundamentally add up when, again, even when you don't have storms, how is it that it's still the fault of the advocates, the mitigation companies, the public adjusters, the attorneys? How is it still their fault that the insurance companies can't manage the money in a way and can't negotiate on reinsurance and help the market? And I honestly think, you know what I think it is? I think the legislation is weak on the insurance companies. That's what I think it is. My opinion is that it's a weak legislator, because when the legislator was tough on insurance companies, things changed. There was a competitive market. There was more insurance companies in the market. It was once said to a bigger insurance company who insured a lot of houses and a lot of cars here, if you don't want to insure the houses, then take your cars with you. And that insurance company came back into the market, continued to be competitive, and continued to sell insurance. And where are we going to draw a line here in making the insurance companies more honest about what they're doing? I want to know what the average time period it takes for an insured to get paid from a major disaster from an insurance. I haven't seen those numbers. I'm interested in that because I know from Hurricane Michael and my experience in there and all the litigation, most of it had to do with the length of time it was taking. A lot of lawsuits that were filed after that storm had to do with the fact that people actually never even heard back from the insurance company. In fact, I know after Hurricane Irma in 2017, there was one insurer that was selling a tremendous amount of insurance to community associations. The corporate record went on record in a deposition as stating that they were unaware of any claim that they had paid following the Hurricane Irma storm, despite the fact that they were a large insurer of hundreds of community associations in the Florida region, not just South Florida, Florida region. And honestly, in polling some public adjusters and lawyers and some mitigation companies out there, I couldn't find anyone that received any sort of remuneration or payment from them. That's not to say that they didn't, but not even their own corporate rep could. So let's dissect these issues before we start saying that the public adjusters, the lawyers, the mitigation companies are the predators. Quite frankly, I'm not sure that that's even close to being true. We're experiencing a hard market when the real estate market was out of control. People were profiting hand over fist. And guess what? Guess who one of the biggest investors in real estate is in our country? Insurance companies. What are they investing? Your premium dollars. Their money they make from the product you buy from them. They're reinvesting. They're investing in those things. Now, it's not just property insurance companies that are doing that. It's also other different lines of insurance. But if you're going to blanketly paint things as the responsibility of insurance advocates for policyholders that are causing the issues in the insurance market in Florida, then why can't it be the same for us, saying it of insurance companies and just say that insurance companies are taking advantage of policyholders by not paying claims, and while they're making profits, they're still not paying their debts that are owed to their insureds when they have losses. It's just fundamentally something's not making sense. And when I'm out in the market right now, and I'm managing multi-million-dollar losses, and I'm hearing how insurance companies who don't have, let's say, provisions in their policies like wind-driven rain, it specifically doesn't state it. It's specifically not included. This is reminiscent of virus, right? When you had the pandemic, they had the opportunity to include an exclusion for virus or bacteria in their commercial policy forms, and they chose not to include it. Despite the fact that there's been many judges in courts and throughout the countries that have ruled in favor of insurance companies, it begs the question, though, did they really not intend to insure for damages caused by virus, whether directly or indirectly damaging property, if they so chose not to include those forms in there? Now here we are, 2022, Hurricane Ian, and I'm hearing insurance companies out there, we just picked up a claim actually, where an association was frustrated by the reaction that they got from their broker and the insurance company to their claim. And there was this insinuation that they're not going to meet the deductible, and that they may only expect to collect $100,000 for interior damages, and that most of it was associated with wind-driven rain. They're not even sure they're going to collect on that because if there's not there's not a wind-created opening in the building, that they would get a limitation or exclusion for wind-driven rain. It was actually in an email. But again, I looked at the policy. There's no contemplation of wind-driven rain. Let's rewind back to 2005, Hurricane Wilma. Now, the reality of those is that if I had an opening in my roof and I had water in my building, no one even questioned whether or not the windows themselves had suffered any wind-driven rain or damage from the storm or whatever you want to call it these days. Suddenly, hurricane damage is something other than hurricane damage, and it's this wind-driven rain issue, right? So there was this. So I asked the examiner once we've been retained by it. I said, okay, let's rewind. You've been doing this a long time, 20 some years. The gentleman told me. I said, tell me something. If this was Hurricane Wilma, would we even be having this conversation? He said, no, man. These claims got paid quickly. I said, right. I said, so why are we having this conversation if this policy doesn't include that provision? He goes, because I can't get it approved. So approved by who? And he wouldn't obviously disclose any further information about it. He simply told me, though, is that there was an internal memo, and he was directive that said that they're not paying for interior damages, even though part of the roof was ripped off and water was in the building. But on the lower floors, where the windows clearly failed, they were not going to consider any of those damages because there's an exclusion for wind-driven rain. And I or the policyholder has to prove that the window itself had failed or damaged from the storm. And I'm like, okay, fine, we'll do that investigation. He goes, but I can already tell you that our adjuster believes this is all wind-driven rain and it's not covered by the policy. So I'm like, all right, man, this is like a catch-22. Where am I supposed to go with this? Are you going to do a proper investigation or not? Because the policy says nothing about wind-driven rain. And the reason why I bring this up is because, again, we're talking about predators here, right? You sold me a product. Are you going to do an honest and complete and prompt investigation into these claims or not? And the reality of it is that I don't think that a lot of people that have been suffering damage from Hurricane Ian are going to be serviced the way in which they should if they don't have representation. And it's not because insurance advocates are predators. It's because the legislator right now is protecting the interests of insurance companies more so than the interests of policyholders. And if you look at the current legislation that was just recently passed in 4D, there's still questions about if I make a repair to my roof because you don't pay me to replace it consistent with basic engineering and construction principles, which determine that the 25% rules that's known needs to be replaced. And now because insurance companies lobbied for laws to restrict those payments because they don't want to do it, not because of engineering or construction principles, but because they just don't think they should owe for it because of these alleged predators making these claims, inflating these claims, again, ignoring basic engineering and construction principles. How old is my roof? And some of the legislators that pushed for this piece of legislation couldn't even explain that and actually went on record as saying, well, there's things that we need to work out. Well, here we are. There's a hurricane. How do you figure it out? What's next? We don't have answers to it. So while insurance advocates are being painted as predators and insurance companies are reassigning and assigning and reassigning files repeatedly after Hurricane Ian because they're understaffed. And while insurance companies rake in profits, here we are. Here we are today, 2022, doing what we can to represent. Is it all doom and gloom? No, it's not. Because you still have a legal right to representation. And despite the way that the CFO and those have painted those that are trying to advocate for policyholders, there's a lot of evidence out there, and I beg of you to go try it and look for it. It's not very hard. There's so much of it to show you all the good things that an advocate can do for you. And that's what today's message is about, is that there is an answer to all of this. There's an answer to your woes and your issues that you're going to experience through your claims process. Most of you who have suffered damages from Hurricane Ian, unfortunately, will not even be aware, may not even be aware of where you've been underpaid or prejudiced in your recoveries. But with the help and with the advocacy of people like myself, or the experts here at GlobalPro, we want to make sure that you get everything that you're entitled to, that you understand the process, and that you are not taken advantage of. That's really what our job is there to do. It's honest work by policyholders to make sure that they're represented in a way that protects their interests. And if there's anything that we can do, let us know. Check us out online. Go to globalpro.com. Hey, reach out to us, 855-487-7475. Let us know what we can do to help you. And a lot of times it's just a simple cursory overview, right? If you've suffered damage, your business, your community center, your community association, reach out to us. We're not going to just jam a contract in front of you. We want to make sure that we can actually do something to help you, because we aren't predators. We are advocates. We want to do an honest job for you, do honest by you, to make sure that your insurance company is doing what it's required to pursuant to the laws and your policy. And that's what this is all about. Make sure you're liking us and following us on all our social media channels. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. We want to make sure that you have the information you can use. That's what this is about. This is making sure that you as policyholders are protecting your interests. We'll see you next time right here, same place, right here on the Recovery Report Live.